I want to be able to help other families and students reach their full potential. Education is probably one of the most important things that's going to determine future success. There's very few things that would be better suited for my time to be able to help folks obtain.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, welcome to the Dan Parsons Show. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. Coming up on today's show, John Cartier, candidate for Lincoln Public School Board. But before I introduce John, a reminder to hop on over to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. And do you have a burning question for one of our guests? Go to thedanparsonsshow.com and become a friend of Dan on Patreon, and we'll choose one of your questions to ask our guests.
The people decide. The voices impacting Lincoln. This is Election Coverage 2025 on The Dan Parsons Show.
Yes, and we are focusing on the Lincoln City elections the next few weeks, including the races for Lincoln Board of Education. There are 4 seats on the Lincoln Board of Education that are up for election this spring. The top 2 candidates in each district will advance from the April 8th primary election to the general election on May 6th. And it's my pleasure to introduce one of those candidates, Mr. John Cartier. John is running for District 1, which is in, is that true, John? Is it District 1?
District 1, that's right.
Which is the northeast part of the city. He'll face John Goodwin, a Lincoln nonprofit leader for the seat on the officially nonpartisan board. So John, welcome to the Dan Parsons Show.
Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be here. Really appreciate you providing this space to hear a little bit more about my campaign and give me a nice venue to let the voting public know more about me.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's our joy. It's so important. These races are so important, and I understand. And a lot of us are kind of tired of politics, and but it's important. It's so important to let the voters know what's going on. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you running. It's not a small deal. It's not for the faint of heart, and so no, I appreciate your time. Well, a little bio before we get into the meat of this. According to my notes, originally from Las Vegas. Moved to Nebraska in 2010 to attend Concordia University in Seward, and later the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's College of Law. You have since worked as an attorney in Lincoln and Omaha, and now you work for a nationwide law firm. You previously ran for the LPS school board back in 2015 when you were just a kid, just a law student.
That's
so,
right.
What did you learn from that experience?
Oh, goodness. So much, and really started to develop my network from there. And I always had an interest in public law, but specifically elections. And that was a great sort of boot camp to get introduced to what it really takes to be a candidate and what you need to do to prepare your campaign. And from there, that really prepared me to, first of all, finish law school. And then from there, go into specifically working at elections at Civic Nebraska.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Well, coincidentally, Civic Nebraska is one of our partners with the Voter Guide. We'll get to that later in the interview here. But, well, I appreciate the area of law. I always, back in my childhood, thought that maybe I would become an attorney. I did work in the Attorney General's office, but I don't have a law degree. I was just the PR person. But no, I appreciate your practice. I appreciate your passion for public service. It's needed more than ever today. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, as I think I briefed you before we started a little Q&A to not only help our listeners and viewers get to know you better, and I'm doing this with all of my guests here recently, but also you get to throw one back at me. So if you're ready, let's do these 4 get to know you questions. I call this a dance 4 and you're 1.
Let's do it.
Yeah, if you're ready. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I claim Las Vegas as my hometown, but I was born in Heber, Utah, which is a small town, north of Park City, Utah, where that's where I actually grew up, where my mom had a house there, and we moved when I was 9 to Las Vegas, and that's where I graduated high school from.
Interesting. Well, that had to be an interesting experience growing up in a tourist attraction, I
You,
suspect.
it was for Las Vegas certainly, but I was fortunate enough to be living in Park City before the Winter Olympics in 2000, and
Yeah.
it was still a little bit of an unknown spot. More of the flavor of being a small mining community more than anything. And then, I mean, ever since this 2000, it's really exploded, and people say the billionaires have made the millionaires move out of there because it's a very hot destination for skiing.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Question number 2. What was your dream job when you were a kid?
Yeah, I very trying to draw back on this question. I went through a couple different phases. As you can tell on my wall there, I was a huge fan of the X-Files. And so I just absolutely love the idea of working in an agency like the FBI, especially investigating weird paranormal subjects. From there, I also explored the idea of joining the military. My family has a strong service background, and that was something that I was going to do for a while, and then plans change, obviously. But what I do now through public interest law, I think helps really, facilitate what I wanted to do, is serve my community all the way back then.
Very cool. Very cool. Question number 3. What's the most famous person you've ever met?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get my shoes signed by Jeremy Warner, who was a really good 400-meter runner back when I was running track at Concordia. And I just reached out to him on Twitter. He was going to be at a meet we were at, and said, "Hey, it's my birthday. I'd love you to sign my shoes." I didn't think he was going to respond, and he did, and met him real briefly and signed my shoes. And I still have those track spikes to this day.
Very cool. That's a cool story. That has to be one of the most unique answers to this question as we've been doing this. That's really cool.
Yeah, he's a little obscure, but not to me. He was a very like one of those kind of hero figures when I was in track.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, last one for you. What was the first concert you ever attended?
Yeah, the first concert I could really say I attended was Electric Daisy Carnival in 2009. That was when it was still in Los Angeles in the Coliseum. And then the year after, they moved it to Las Vegas. So me and my friends, we packed in a van and went out there and just had a blast. It was so much fun.
Nice. That's cool. Okay, your question for me.
Yeah, I decided to go kind of more of a weird question. And it's also timely because there's just been so much, I think, in the news, like conspiracy related stuff. And then just the strange drones episode that's been going on the eastern coast of the United States. So what's your position on aliens?
Nice. I love it. Well, if you can indulge me for a moment, talking
Absolutely.
about thinking of my childhood, I was fascinated. You mentioned X-Files. I was fascinated with kind of the paranormal. I was fascinated with the Kennedy assassination. I was kind of went down that rabbit hole. I was fascinated with Bigfoot as a kid of that. I went down that rabbit hole. But I think that still kind of draws me into now. I went to journalism school. I guess people consider me somewhat of a journalist now that I've got a podcast, and so I'm all about sticking to facts. And so I guess I don't go down those rabbit holes in the way that I used to as a kid, but it still fascinates me of, again, the paranormal and the aliens. I mean, there has to be. I just believe, I do believe in a higher power, and I just can't believe that we exist in this universe without some other being with us on this globe in this universe. So, yeah, I definitely believe in aliens. Yeah.
I love that answer. Thank you. And Yeah, very similar. My fascination, I'm trying to remember, it must have been like 7 or 6. And I discovered the Loch Ness Monster. And,
Yes, me too. Yes.
that's probably one of the more silly ones to indulge in, but
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure. Look, I got 3 boys now, and my middle one, he's especially interested in just kind of those weird stuff. So it's been fun to
That's cool.
go over that stuff with him.
That's very cool. Yeah. Well, hey, you win the award for the most unique question so far.
I appreciate
so
that.
That's cool. Okay, as I mentioned in the opening, we are partnering with Civic Nebraska and Flatwater Free Press, 2 great nonprofit organizations here in Nebraska, because they are putting together a voter guide for these city elections. And I would encourage our listeners and viewers to check that out. Go to Flatwater Free Press and Civic Nebraska, and you can sign up for that and find their voter guide. They'll deliver that voter guide to you. One of those questions from that voter guide is this: what is the most pressing issue facing Lincoln Public Schools? And if elected, how would you address it?
Yeah, the most practical one, I think, is teacher retention, certainly. And I think that is also falls in the backdrop of, I mean, really over the last decade, we've seen a serious attack on public education. And it's come from a variety of sources. And we see this now, especially with the dismantling of the Department of Education. And, the wisdom behind a decision like that, we could debate it, of course, but the practical effects of all that disruption and preventing resources going to high needs children and a lot of these schools that, I mean, rely on so much funding from federal government and other sources to be able to provide quality education, no matter what your socioeconomic background is. So that would be, I think, the biggest issue facing LPS today. Now, once elected to the Board of Education, really the most important thing we do is work with the budget. And so when we're controlling the purse strings, we need to pay special attention to our competitive salaries for teachers. And LPS, we do a great job already, I think, of providing competitive salaries and attracting teachers to stay in the profession here, but there can always be more work done. And it's also a cultural thing. And you can look at other countries, and I think they value their public teachers a lot more, and that's reflected in their pay. So I think around the starting average is about around 60,000 here in LPS, which is good, but we can always do better and strive to be better for our educators who donate so much of their time and energy and really unfunded time for prep and outside the classroom. So I think that would be a huge priority of mine.
Yeah, just picking up on that, John. I do know that many people are concerned about the teacher retention and the recruitment of teachers, especially since COVID. We've seen a pretty good exodus from LPS of longtime teachers, and I just think that's important to continue to think about of recruit, because we have had such a rich tradition in this city of having quality educators, and if that is slipping a little bit, I think that is a very important issue. So maybe just talk about that a little bit more, just expand on that a little bit more, John, of what can we do to make sure that LPS continues to attract and keep the most talented educators.
Yeah. So I think it's also a great opportunity because, as you mentioned, we have a generation of teachers that are retiring, and they've done so much already for decades, and you should be able to retire after a while. But that provides an opportunity for the next generation to come in and fill those shoes. So taking a look at possibilities with mentorships with retired teachers have been around longer, with teachers that are entering in the program, prioritizing mental health resources for both teachers and students, and as well as making sure that they feel heard and supported by their administration and as well as the Board of Education. So that's why my campaign has been really centered around teachers and working with specifically Lincoln Education Association, who I'm endorsed by, and making sure that if there's anything that a teacher feels like is a concern, that they could feel like they can approach me and talk to me about it and be honest. And from there, I'm able to represent them as not only a constituent, but as teachers. So there's a variety of different things that LPS has done well, but continuing to build upon that success is going to be critical. And again, a lot of it has to do with where we're funding, how we're prioritizing money, and moving forward as a city in the wake of COVID and the increasingly aggressive attacks on public education, which I think stigmatizes being a public teacher to a degree and makes people hesitant to join the field. And I've witnessed this from friends of our family who's went to Concordia and other institutions specifically where they train teachers, and they burn out after a couple of years. And that's just terrible, especially when you spend your entire 4-year degree specifically to be a teacher.
Yeah, that's good. Let's talk about school safety. The concerns about school safety and student mental health continue to take center stage nationally. How will you ensure Lincoln schools remain safe and welcoming for all students?
Yeah, so working alongside with our public resource officers is going to be critical. I know there's been a lot of controversy with police within our schools and the discrepancy between the various, racial minority groups receiving a lot more arrests and detention by PROs, but that's a reality we're living in. And moving forward, transparency is huge for Board of Education and being answerable to those criticisms and looking at it impartial and evidence-based best practices to see what really does support our students. And with rising, I think recently within the last couple of years, the number one cause of death for children is firearms. And that's a horrible statistic. And we're unique in the entire world with that statistic. So I think there's an opportunity for someone who's on the Board of Education to use their voice, not only within our local school district, but also when we're dealing with legislation at the unicameral level. And that's reflected in one of the subcommittees that LPS Board of Education has, and that's the civic engagement. So being an advocate for legislation that's going to protect students, make sure gun safety is priority, and mental health resources are accessible is going to be key to address that problem of violence in schools, especially.
Yeah, that's good. President Trump, as promised, has signed an executive order calling for the dismantling of the U.S. Education Department, advancing a campaign promise to eliminate the agency. The order instructed the Secretary of Education to return authority over education to the states. What impact will this have on local school districts in Nebraska? And do you agree with that order?
Well, first of all, I don't agree with that order. I'm a constitutional attorney first and foremost, and I thoroughly believe that legislation passed by the federal government, the Senate and the House, that can't be overturned by an executive action with a president that is overreaching their authority. Unfortunately, that has been the administration's MO, is to just proceed recklessly with action. And then, the rest of us are trying to play catch up and fight it where we can in the courts and elsewhere. But, what it does practically is it creates a lot of confusion and chaos, which I think is the point. And the most important thing is that funding of federal dollars coming into our schools. And it's so important to support after school programming, feeding our students. I think, just alone feeding our students and making sure that there's no hungry bellies, that's one of the biggest barriers to getting an education. So when we're talking about dismantling the Department of Education, we need to look at all that millions of dollars that come into Nebraska to support our public schools. What's going to happen there? Is there going to be something that's going to fill and replace that need? Have they even thought about, these hundreds of different programs are going to be affected? I don't think so. So it's very concerning. And, on the Board of Education, I'll do whatever I can to help alleviate those destructive practices by this current administration.
Yeah. Hey, we're about through this. We're whipping through this pretty good. Talk about how you perceive just getting out and talking to people in this campaign mode. Again, you've run for political office before. That's a plus. But it's a district, and so you have a fairly identifiable base of folks that you want to get to. But talk a little bit about that campaign process And I think one of the things that I've always, and as you may know, I've been involved in politics most of my adult life here in the state. Um, Advantages and disadvantages in these city elections. They happen really quick. I mean, it's just a few weeks between the April and the May, the April primary and the May ballot. Anyway, just maybe talk about that experience that you've had in the campaign world.
Yeah, that's a great question. So personally, canvassing mode is something I actually enjoy, and I'm more of an introverted person, but I got going working on Dave Domina's Senate campaign. That was like my first, go as just a paid canvasser, and talking to hundreds, probably 1,000 people at least at their door. That really helped get over being shy. And
Yes, it will.
Yeah, it really does. And so, at this point, like, I really enjoy getting to know my constituents, the people that, have kids going to the public schools, and what their concerns and needs are, and being able to be their voice for them. I don't think there's very many other higher callings than that. So, I really embrace that aspect of running a campaign. It is tiresome, and luckily it is a short cycle though. I think I would prefer this over the usual election year, which is the entire year. Yeah. And coming off of that, like, just feeling of being tired and upset about, the results of the 2024 election and the burnout that associated with that, that was a factor before I really committed to running. But I think now more than ever, we need people stepping up who are going to be representing locally the best interests of our students and teachers and parents more than ever, because it could be very easily swung the other way, where we have this proud tradition of supporting public schools and LPS going the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'll finish with a couple softballs here. Right. I'm in the business of public relations and messaging, and so as we call it in my world, your elevator speech. So give me your elevator speech.
Yeah, the elevator speech. Well, so I come from a background where my mom was a single mother. She did what she could to put me through the best education that was available to us, and that came at a huge, great sacrifice to her. The results were astounding. I'm the first one in my family was able to graduate college from, my mom's side. And from there, going back however many generations, a first lawyer. So being able to have that opportunity given to me has really opened the doors. And I want to be able to help other families and students reach their full potential. And education is up there it is probably one of the most important things that's going to determine future success. So constructing and making sure our LPS system is robust and able to prioritize the equitable education across our entire school districts for all of our students. There's, again, very few things that would be better suited for my time to be able to help folks obtain.
It just occurred to me, I don't believe there's any attorneys currently on the school board.
That's surprising.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
think you might be right.
Yeah. And I can't, Dr. Bob doesn't have a law degree, I don't believe. Yeah. I can't remember last time.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So interesting. Anyway.
Maybe time, but there's that old trope of politicians always having a law degree and being attorneys. And so I understand that you need a diverse perspective, but sometimes it's good to have someone who has a strong civil rights and constitutional law background with dealing in public education.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. 2 more and I'm out of here. These are the softball ones.
All right.
Continue. What haven't I asked you, John, that you would like to talk about?
Yeah. What are the biggest concerns for families living in my district, in Northeast Lincoln? And I love where I live specifically because it's a blue collar community. And there's a very horrible statistic that I go to Horizons Church, which is South Lincoln, but they talk about the discrepancies between the resources between the North and South Lincoln. And I think the average life expectancy between North and South Lincoln is less by about 10 years. And that's a shocking statistic. So, It's a lot. It's very, very difficult, especially today's day and age where inflation has gone out of control, wages haven't kept up. Healthcare is basically, a dream for most people. And how do we deal with all these pressures on top of raising our families and just waking up and putting on a bright face for our children and setting a good example? I don't have a perfect solution, but every day when I wake up, I just ask myself, what can I do to be a good example for my kids, and execute on whatever's going to be the best decision at that, on that given day, be a good example. So that's kind of a rambling, but I think recognizing just how tough it is, and we're not even necessarily in an official recession, but hard times, they are already here, and that's really depressing.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, how can our viewers and listeners learn more about your campaign?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, go to cartierforlincoln.com. Spell my last name Cartier. Got a basic campaign website set up, but it's outlined some of the priorities of my campaign and what I want to instill in the Board of Education through my participation, and appreciate your support and your consideration to have me represent your interests in District 1.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks so much, John, for joining me on the pod today. Best of luck in your race for Lincoln School Board. Thanks to our producer, Chase Porter, and to Penology Tech Solutions for the technical help and equipment, and Kim Remington, Parsons PR's Director of Operations. And most importantly, thanks to each of you for tuning in. It really does mean a great deal to me. That's the show. Thanks for tuning in. Now go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.